can you guys hear me okay? Awesome. Thank you so much, Max. That was such a great introduction. That was so sweet. I'm so excited to be talking to you all today. I remember being in your shoes. It doesn't feel like that long ago at all. And I remember joking about like, oh, we're gonna come back and do our Duncan Anderson lecture. So it feels pretty crazy to actually be doing that. And I feel so grateful for this opportunity to just share with you a little bit of what I've been up to since graduation. So I wanna be talking to you about a little concept that I invented. Actually, I don't know that because I haven't Googled it, but for now I invented it, called creative problem finding. So as designers, we usually talk about how we're creative problem solvers, but I really want to talk about creative problem finding, which I define as identifying areas of opportunity for innovation in complex ecosystems. So as designers, we really want to think about how we can use our skills to tackle really important problems and make things that are truly useful and impactful for users. But before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about myself. So as Max mentioned, when I was a student, I kind of always considered myself like a product designer who didn't like products that much. I was always more motivated by people and what they wanted and big ideas and big problems. So that's how I always chose to tackle my design solutions, and I never really cared about like the actual problem that I was making. And a big problem with our industry is that like most things are not made for most people. And so there are tons of examples of this, right? Like women are still treated as like a niche market when we're like 50% of people, right? Like crash test dummies were only tested on men, so more women die in car accidents. Like hand soap dispensers detect light skin more than dark skin. So there are all of these examples of how design doesn't really fit most people. And so those problems were always the one that really, really interested me. So as a student, I was always really, really attracted to like a big problem. Like I always wanted to tackle like sexism or like gun violence, like things that on the surface don't seem like they have a real solution, but those were always the projects that really, really inspired me. And so my senior year, I did my thesis project on gender bias in medicine, and thanks to Max Beach, that's how I got connected with Karten Design, and I got hired with them right after graduation to do a lot of these big picture innovation projects. So my role at Karten has really been kind of in between design and design research. So I really work on creating frameworks and building narratives for our clients in order for them to create the best product in the healthcare space that can impact users. So healthcare is super complicated, right? There are so many different users, there are so many different environments, and so it's really important for our clients to really know what they are making and really understand that context before they actually go to production with anything. So for me, I like to look at problems in a couple different levels. So for me, I like to look at it through a user perspective, environment, community, and institution. And so I'm gonna go through some examples of my work in each of these different categories to demonstrate how we've tackled different problems and created solutions that work best for these users. And this is a picture of me and Benji doing creative problem finding. He's right there. But yeah, so let us get into it. Oops. Okay, so our first category is user. So this project I'm going to be talking about is something that we designed. It was a next generation toolkit for a spinal procedure. So our first step was to interview a bunch of people. We talked to like 20 different physicians over a wide range of experience levels, from beginners to intermediate to experts. And we ran virtual interviews with all of them. So interviewing users has become like a big part of my job. And I have 3 tricks to interviewing users. I don't have a slide for it, so just pay attention to my words. The first trick is to really be present with the interview. So I never even take notes. Like, our interviews are always recorded, and it really allows you to kind of be engaged and be in the moment with the person. And afterwards, I like blank out. I'm like, what did I just say? was that? I don't even know, but it's super, super helpful. The second thing is to always make sure you're asking open-ended questions. You never want to ask something that could be a yes or no, because what you're really trying to get at is not the what of something, but the why behind it. And that's why we do these interviews. That's why it's not a survey. You really want to start understanding people's motivations and why they want certain things. And then the third thing is the first 10 minutes and the last 10 minutes of the interview, I think, are the most important, because the first 10 minutes is when you're really starting to build that rapport with the person, and you really want to get them comfortable. You really want to get them engaged with you and comfortable sharing things. And then the last 10 minutes, we usually ask them some summary questions of, is there anything else that you remember that you haven't told us yet? And usually they'll be like, no, I can't remember anything. Oh, actually, wait. And then that's like where the real thing like happens. You're like, oh my gosh, that's the nugget that we were looking for. So those are my tips for interviewing. So based on this project, we created a ton of data points based on these interviews. And a thing that we really work on at Karten is presenting research in a really interesting and engaging way. So once we have all these data points, what do we do with that? What does that mean? How do we turn that into design solutions? So what we got from all of these users was such a wide range of feedback. So I created this infographic that basically is like the structure of the procedure, and all of these flags are the pain points that people were experiencing. So from a distance, when you look at this, you can see, oh, these areas had a bunch of pain points, and they're divided into two categories. Physical pain points and cognitive pain points. Because from our interviews, we realized that it wasn't just like the physical nature of the tool that was important to users, but it was also the cognitive load. Like there were times where they're like, I'm really afraid this is gonna drop on the floor. And we're like, well, did that happen? They're like, no, but it could happen. And that's important insight. Like, so when we went ahead with our design, we made sure we didn't make anything with that was round, that it always had a flat side so it wouldn't roll off the table. And so our solution for this actually went to market recently, and we ended up reducing the tools from like 6 to 3 and tackling most of the pain points in this area. And that was really cool because we ended up revisiting our map and showing how it changed with the new design. And then when it came time for the next generation, we were like, okay, let's move on to the next area of the biggest pain points. So all of that came from our user interviews and our user data, and it was a really, really cool way to show the process and like a really cool result as well. So unfortunately, I can't share like a lot of details about these projects, and I know like this medical stuff can get like kind of boring. So in order to spice things up, I've also decided to rank my favorite creative reality TV shows. And if you disagree with my rankings, that's just too bad, and you can talk about it in your Duncan Anderson lecture next time. Okay, so starting with number 5, my 5th favorite creative reality TV show. It has to be Chopped. Do you guys like the show? It's so good, right? It's like so intense, and it's like such a cool way to see people being so creative with limited time and limited resources and like things that they've never maybe used before, cooked with before. It's like so cool, so intense. Love to see the creativity. The only problem with Chopped is it like truly gives me high blood pressure. Like it's like so stressful to watch. And like every episode, I swear there's like the person with the saddest story I've ever heard in my entire life. They're like, I immigrated here with my mom and then she died and then my house burned down and I have a kid and my husband died and then Ted's like, you've been chopped. And I'm like, oh my God, how will they do this? Oh no, what happened? There we go. So that's why it's number 5, because I can't always get through every episode after my favorite person has been chopped. Let's see. Can we go to the next one? Sorry guys, 1 second. No? There we go. Okay, back to business. So our next category is the environment. So this project I want to talk about is for a client who was really interested in digital innovation in the ICU space, specifically for patient monitoring. And so they had done a bunch of research already, but it wasn't like consolidated in one space, and they had like no clear idea of what the real opportunity was and what this product actually needed to be. And like the ICU is a crazy environment. Like nurses have to go through so much in a day and in a shift. There's so many different devices. It's like so many different lines that they have to manage. It's a high stress environment. So whatever they made had to be like really, really targeted to fit their workflow, but they didn't really have a good understanding of what that workflow was. So we created this really crazy workflow map to represent that. And if it looks chaotic, it's because it is chaotic in the ICU. And we wanted to convey that through the workflow map as well. And so as you can see, we have the patient in the center, and everything else is what nurses have to do during the day to take care of just one patient. Like this can be like multiplied like 2 or 3 times based on like everything they have to do. And until we made this map, our client had no idea about like what nurses actually did in the ICU space. And so we also like made sure to document all of the pain points that we heard in our user interviews and tie it back to each step in the workflow document. So you can see like from a high level, like if there's a lot of red in this area, that means they have a lot of documentation challenges. If it's a lot of orange, they have a lot of time-saving issues. So it provided a really high level picture about where the needs and the opportunities and the pain points were in the nurse's workflow. And so based on this, our client was able to kind of really identify how they had to adapt their project to fit in this environment. And basically we learned that like, if you're going to be adding anything to this, you better be removing 10 steps because nurses will not accept it otherwise. And that's a huge deal, right? Like these clients are spending millions of dollars to make something, like it better be something that people will use, right? And so that's why this step is really important. And that's why we had to make it very specific to the ICU environment. Which brings us to number 4. So, Great British Bake Off. So good. The opposite of the ICU environment, right? The opposite of Chopped. It's just so feel good. The music like puts me to sleep immediately. It's so relaxing. They're all like amateurs, which is like a really cool way to like have a show. There's like no prize money, so I feel like that's why everyone is so nice. And I honestly think this is like brainwash for recolonization, right? Like they make England seem like too good. Like every season there's like an Indian person that's like too beautiful, and you're like, where'd you come from? And they do really well. They go all the way to the finale, and you're like, oh my God, like I'm so proud of my culture. Like take my spices. And then you're like, wait, no, that was bad. We don't want that. So that's why it's number 4. But excellent show, new season streaming on Netflix. Next category, community. So the next thing I want to talk about is neuromodulation patients. So neuromodulation is a therapy where a patient can basically get an implant, and that implant will send stimulation to their brain to rewire their brain, and basically treats different conditions like chronic pain, overactive bladder, sleep apnea, any sort of thing. So we've done a couple of different projects in the neuromodulation space, but the patient type is pretty similar. And I wanted to show some examples here about how we go about organizing our research. And so this down here is an example of like an interview and the notes that we take from the interview. So we have different categories that we've divided it into, and then each color is like representative of that category. And when it comes time to analyze that research, we start to group everything. So you can see all the challenges are orange, so these all became oranges, and all the similarities start to be grouped, and then we can start identifying the theme that those quotes or those insights start to become. And so that starts to build out our research deck and starts to build out the high level issues that start coming out of the research. For example, like surprise-free success or bridging the gap in treatments. Those are all from these different little nuggets of research that we created. And something similar that we've noticed throughout all neuromodulation patients is that they all seek some type of community. When they go into these treatments, they're already pretty deep into it. It's like the 3rd line of treatment, right? So they're frustrated, they're having a hard time, and they don't know how to navigate the system. And so in general, they really crave community. They really crave a way to connect with others, other patients, other physicians, their partner. And so as you can see from these quotes, they would say, I have nowhere to go, nowhere to seek help. I would really like some sort of support. So for one of these projects, our client was really, really focused on hardware solutions. And then after the research, we realized what was really missing was some type of software solution, some type of patient app that would connect patients to other patients, to connect them to their physicians so they didn't feel as alone and as isolated, because that community aspect is so important. I also just wanted to point out, clients don't always pay for first-person research, and if that's the case, I've gotten really good at cyber stalking people. I'll go on Reddit, or people post their whole life on YouTube, or I'll join Facebook groups. Oh my gosh, my Facebook groups I've joined are crazy. I swear my FBI surveillance guy is probably is she okay? It's diabetes, sleep apnea, but it's the best way to understand what people are going through, because it's a safe space. They feel comfortable just posting about what they're going through. They know everyone else is going through the same thing, and it's super, super helpful to gather insights that way if you can't actually talk to people. Which brings me to my number 3 spot. So, number 3, Project Runway. So good. Have you guys seen Project Runway? It's been on forever. It's so good. I feel like I only started to understand fashion after I watched this show. And I think out of all the reality TV shows, it has the best finale, because it's a runway collection at New York Fashion Week. It's such a cool build-up. They get to really show who they are as a designer. There are pieces that I still think about today. This one was for a contestant who was hearing impaired, and he did his whole last collection about his journey from going from being deaf to being able to hear, and it was about how he didn't like the sound of anything at first until he heard rain. So he designed this dress made out of test tubes, and when it walked down the runway, it sounded like rain. I think about it once a month. It changed my life. It was so good. So anyway, I think you can watch this on Peacock. So good. And that brings me to our next category, institutions. So in healthcare, we deal with a lot of different types of institutions, whether it's big hospital systems, small hospital systems, insurance companies, anything like that. And this project that we were working on was for ASCs, and those are kind of outpatient surgical centers. So a general trend we're seeing in healthcare is care being pushed out of hospitals, because people hate being in hospitals, and more into the home. So in an outpatient center, you can get a procedure done and then go home right afterwards, which is better for patients and better for clinicians. So our client recognized this trend and wanted to know how they could innovate in this space, specifically for medication delivery. So of course we did research, of course we made our lovely little workflow map with all the pain points, showcasing all the different users and what they go through during the day. And then this is kind of an example of how we present our research. So we have our needs statement. So ASCs need automated solutions to better manage inventory and reduce clinician burden. And then some points from the research to back up that statement. And then of course, the shiny cool stuff that the client always wants to know, the opportunities. So ASCs need solutions that would safely automate tracking of medications. So that's something that we discovered through our research. And whenever we present an opportunity, we want to tie it back to a quote, so that they know where it came from. They know we didn't just make it up. They know that a real person said this, and that's why we put it as an opportunity. So that's a really, really important part of our research effort, is always making sure our insights are tied back to that actual data. Number 2, RuPaul's Drag Race. Also very good. I think there's 16 seasons, but you have to start at season 1, because it truly is a culture and a community, and they make jokes from the season 1 that if you don't watch it, you don't get it. But talk about a show that really changed everything for a community and a culture, right? It really put drag on a different level on a main stage, and the challenges they do are so good. They test, it's extreme Project Runway. They do fashion stuff, they do acting, singing, dance, everything. And it's the artistry is truly, truly incredible, and really love this show. I think this last season just finished, and it was really good. So Paramount Plus, you can watch RuPaul's Drag Race, really good. The last category, society. This is my favorite category to design for, but in real life, when you're working for a company, it's difficult to get these projects, obviously. So the one I want to talk about that we did get that was really exciting was for a cervical cancer treatment device. So the device for cervical cancer treatment is called brachytherapy, and it was designed in the 1970s without women in mind, and it's supposed to be so painful, like 5 times more painful than childbirth. And like there's literally like quotes saying like, I would rather die than get this treatment because it is that horrifying. And that's a big systemic problem, right? Like women not being able to get treated for cancers that are curable because the devices are so terrible. And so we were tasked with securing our client a patent for a device that would basically adapt to the patient's anatomy so it's not as painful for women. It was a really, really exciting project. So I'm always excited to design anything for women's health. So I was really, really excited to work on this, and we'll see where it goes. It was a great project. So that was kind of everything that we talked about, right, in these 5 categories. And I know we talked about them all separately, but the reality is that they are all connected, right? Like we all exist in these systems. Nothing is isolated. To quote our like almost president, we did not fall out of a coconut tree, right? It's all about the context. And context in design is so important because nothing ever exists alone on its own. It's all about who's using it and where it lives and what it's supposed to be doing. And the best solutions will always live kind of in this whole ecosystem and touch all of these categories, or at least some of these categories, in order to be successful. And that is why creative problem finding is so important, because you want to make sure that your solution really addresses needs in these different areas. And we talked about a bunch of different ways to do that, right? So we talked about listening to users, we talked about identifying areas of need, we talked about gathering and grouping data points to form themes to understand high-level issues that people are having, mapping out journeys and tying that back to pain points and how you can turn those pain points into opportunities, and always tying those opportunities back into research, because that is the most important part. And make sure it's coming from somewhere real. I did not forget, we have one more category. Any guesses for the number 1 spot? Anyone? No? Nothing?
The designer? Tattoos.
Ink Master! So good! My favorite show of all time. You guys, it's so good. I love it because the stakes are so high. Like, they're tattooing real people. And some people get really good tattoos, some people get really bad tattoos. And it's crazy. And I feel like the structure of the show is so good, because like there's always like a little mini flash challenge where they'll have them do like an art piece out of like Post-it notes or like little cups of water on a football field, and they'll produce the most incredible pieces of art. You're like, should this be in a museum? Like, it is that incredible. And also, I have to say, the casting is always amazing for these shows, because it's always really fun to see like these buff tattooed guys like crying over their line weight drawings. I mean, there's nothing like it. It's just like so good. So new season is out right now, or it's currently coming out right now, and it's very good. So highly recommend Ink Master, my favorite show of all time. So I really appreciate you guys listening to me talk about all of my favorite TV shows, but I actually promise it wasn't totally random, because a lot of reasons why these TV shows work are the same reasons that we talked about for design, right? So they all spotlight everyday individuals striving for extraordinary success, like we talked about with Chopped. They like build those narratives where you really want to root for people. They capture creativity under intense pressures, intense circumstances. On Bake Off, they're always like, my cake worked at home, but not in the tent, because they're under an extreme circumstance, an extreme way of working that they're not used to. It gives visibility to niche groups that maybe we wouldn't have heard their stories before, like Drag Race, for example. They present an industry through a lens that we've never seen before. Tattooing, I mean, that like changed after Ink Master. It became so much more mainstream. And most importantly, they inspire change through raising awareness of issues in the industry, right? Like Project Runway will have like an upcycling episode. Drag Race always brings up problems targeting the LGBTQ community. Ink Master talks about how art changed people's lives, and they'll tattoo people who have had breast cancer and things like, and it really moves you. And so that's why the reason these shows all work so well. And I hope when you guys all graduate, you decide to solve the world's most important problems. But even if you don't, no matter if you're designing a medical device or a reality TV show, if you think of things from a holistic perspective, and if you approach the problem in that manner, it will lead you to the most useful, the most meaningful, the most compelling, and the most beautiful solution. Thank you.